Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Kamma daf Pei-Bet. Today's daf is sponsored by Terry Kervosha and Rabbi Chaim Herring in loving memory of Terry's father, Nachum Meir ben David, and Malka, Judge Norman Kervosha on his third yurtzeit, and in honor of their granddaughter, Orly Nessa bat Avi, and Shana, named in his memory. And in memory of all those killed in the war. Unfortunately, this morning there were a whole number just announced in their memory, and for the release of the hostages and the refuah shlema of all those who have been wounded. My dad taught me it is my job as a lawyer to figure out the questions the client doesn't ask, because once you know the questions, the answers are obvious. Though he never studied Talmud, he would have loved its intellectual rigor. Today's daf is sponsored in memory of my mother-in-law, Esther Farber, on her 21st year at site. She would have loved to be part of Hadran and would be learning the daf with us if she were alive today. Okay, we are going to get started this difficult morning with the beginning of daf Pei-Bet, the first words on the daf. We will continue what we did yesterday. We started with 10 takanot that Yoshua instituted upon getting into the land. Today we're going to move to 10 takanot that Ezra instituted, also seemingly when he came back to the land. Okay, so there's an interesting parallel here between Ezra reconquering, going back to Eretz Israel and resettling the land, similar to Yoshua resettling the land and this need to institute takanot for what he saw fit. Different kind of takanot, but we will see. But the first thing, before we get to the takanot that Ezra instituted, we're going to finish with the takanot of Yoshua. So we saw 10 takanot. We said, oh, there's really 11. We said one was really Shlomo and associated with the pasuk of Mishna. Then we said, but what about all these other takanot that people claim? And again, that's going to be the key. One is Rabbi Yehuda and one is Rabbi Shua ben Broka, the son of, Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, who basically said, oh, Yoshua institute this and Yoshua institute that. Well, those are all individual opinions. And because they're individual opinions, they weren't mentioned in this list. We gave the list that was the general list, and that's why they weren't listed there. But now we have one more question. When Ravin came from Israel, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Echad ilan hanotel letoch siach havero, ve'echad ilan hasamuch lemetzal, mevi v'koreh. An interesting halacha. If I have a tree that's leaning into your property, this goes on all the time, or a tree that's right next to the boundary between our fields, which basically means that my roots are probably going into your ground, in your side, and getting nutrients either from sunlight on your side, from the part on the top, or underground from nutrients from your ground, your soil. So theoretically, I'm not really supposed to bring bikurim on that. The bikurim are my first fruits, and it says in the psukim when I make this recitation that it came from my land. Okay, there's pasuk which says me'aretzecha, from my eretz, and also me'admatcha, from the ground, from my ground. But I can't say that if it comes from yours. So theoretically, I'm not really allowed to plant so close to the border so that happens. And if I do, I'm really not supposed to bring the bikurim and state the declaration because it's not really mine. Well, Yoshua instituted that I would bring the bikurim, the first fruits from there, and I would koreh, I would read the text. Because for that reason, or in that vein, Yoshua had the people inherit the land, meaning, what does that mean? It means that he gave them the land and said, listen, you're each going to have your own land, but understand that you're really supposed to share it with others, and that we live in this together. And therefore, if it's your land, right, it's my land, basically. And I can then say the declaration wholeheartedly because you've given me permission for my trees to be getting nutrients from your soil or from the airspace of your land. Ella. So now the question is, where's that takanot? Why is that? If Rabbi Yochanan says that's takanot that Yoshua instituted, why is it not in the list? Ella man tana asarat tanaim shitna Yoshua. So who's the Tana then that says this? It's this bit of a weird question because the answer is going to be it's not a Tana. Okay, and even though we saw it was from a Braita, we're now going to say it was actually an Amora, from a different Amora from Israel, or Rabbi Yochanan's from Israel, and a different Amora. It's funny you wrote that, Becky. I was thinking about it also, right? This land is my land. This land is your land. Okay. Elaman Tana Asarat Naim Shitna Yoshua, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Okay, so now they're going to say this was Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi's version, and that was Rabbi Yochanan had that in his list. But what we're seeing already from the end of yesterday's daf and the beginning of this daf, there was a big debate about what exactly transpired. What were the takanot that Yoshua instituted? There's different opinions. And the 10 that we saw was somebody's opinion. It was Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's opinion. And Rav Gavia mi Beit Ktil, Rav Gavia, that was his name, and he was from a city called Beit Ktil. Matne la behedya, he said this explicitly. He said that instead of there being this question and then answering, oh, it must be Yeshua ben Levi, he said the following. Rabbi Tanchum v'Rabbi Brayas amru mishum zaken echad. If you remember, we had them yesterday. So these two rabbis said in the name of some zaken that these were the 10 takanot, and Manu, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, who was that zaken echad? It was Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. And they said, Asarat Tanaim itna Yoshua. In other words, they passed down in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that there were 10 takanot that Yoshua instituted. End of section. Now we're going to move on to 10 takanot Tiken Ezra. And then we're going to have one last list of 10 halachot, special halachot that they say for Yerushalayim, which doesn't seem really connected because it wasn't takanot necessarily, but it's 10 unique laws for Jerusalem, which relates to this because we have 10, 10, 10. It also relates to this because the content of one of them is going to be actually from our Mishna. So now going to the takanot that Ezra instituted. Some of these you'll be familiar with, some of them not at all. Some of them still exist, some of them not anymore. So what were they? Shekorim b'mincha b'Shabbat. The fact that we read Torah reading on Mincha and Shabbos, which we all know is the case, so that is a takanah of Ezra. Okay, what we're going to first do is read them all. Then the Gemara is going to go one by one, just like they did with Yoshua. Korim b'sheni v'chamishi. We also read on Mondays and Thursdays in Shul. Right, we read from the Torah. V'danim b'sheni v'chamishi. We also hold court on Monday and Thursday. Excuse me. This was all instituted by Ezra. We do laundry on Thursday. I don't know if you do that, but apparently it's a takanah of Ezra to do laundry on Thursday. We'll talk about this when we get to the Gemara on it. Excuse me. We eat garlic on Friday night, or on Friday, but it seems probably they mean Friday night. And women should get up early to bake the bread. Okay, it reminds me of the Dunkin' Donuts time to make the donuts, right? Really early in the morning. So the women would get up very early to bake. Again, we're going to see all this as we go on. She should wear an apron. Okay, so it's to protect her clothes. Good question. We'll get to it in the Gemara. Now we'll see. Some people say sinar is not an apron. That's the modern Hebrew word sinar. Some people say it's like pants or shorts or something underneath her dress. Okay, we'll get to this soon. Before she goes to the mikveh, she should do what's called chafifa. Chafifa in modern Hebrew means to shampoo, okay, to wash your hair. Some people think it's to wash your hair. Rashi says it's to comb her hair. Okay, we'll get to this also. The peddlers that would come from other towns would go around from door to door selling bisamim, like perfumes. They're allowed to do that, meaning that the people in the city can't stop these peddlers from coming from out of town and going door to door selling the perfumes. Even though, let's say, I have a stand in the shuk where I sell perfumes, I can't stop the peddlers from coming in and competing with me for business. We'll get to this later. And Tikain Tfilah Labale Karyan. And he said, a Baal Kari, a man who has a seminal emission, needs to go to the mikveh. Okay, this is strange. Isn't that a Torah law? Torah says you have seminal emission, you have to go to the mikveh. So we'll get to that too. Okay, let's start one by one. Jukolin b'mincha b'Shabbat mishum yoshvei kanot. Okay, yoshvei kanot is translated in two possibly opposite ways. One is the people who work hard during the week, and therefore they can't go to hear the laning in shul on Monday and Thursday, so they instituted Shabbos Mincha. Okay, in the morning we read the Parshat Shavua, and in the afternoon we read next week's Parsha, the one they would have heard on Mondays and Thursdays, but they're too busy during the week to go. Some people say it's the lazy people who have nothing to do. And what's the issue? Well, we don't want people doing nothing on Shabbos afternoon. We want to get them to go to shul and do something valuable with their time. So therefore, they instituted Shabbos at Mincha. So the next one, why do we read the Torah on Mondays and Thursdays? So first the Gemara says, Ezra tikain v'hami kala haba mitakna. Before Ezra, this was a thing. How do we know this? Titania, it says in a Braita, this is after they get out of Egypt, and they go for 3 days in the desert and they don't have water. The people who Darshan, the Torah, said, a mayim ela Torah. Water is always a metaphor for Torah. And it says they went 3 days without water, meaning they didn't have Torah. Shene'emar, hoi kol tzameh lechu l'mayim. Okay, anyone who's thirsty should go for water. Kevan shalchu shlosha yamim below Torah, nil'u. Right, so anyone who's thirsty should go for water. That means that you could get tired from not having water. It means you could get tired on the way from not having Torah. They didn't have Torah again. This was before the Torah was given, but it means some concept, right? This is a metaphor for the fact that they didn't have Torah. Amdu neviim shebenehem v'tiknu lahem shiur korim b'Shabbat. ומפסיקים באחד בשבת וקוראים בשני, מפסיקים בשלישי ורביעי וקוראים בחמישי, מפסיקים ערב שבת, כדי שלא ילינו 3 ימים below Torah. So this Braita says that what did the Nevi'im say? The Nevi'im at the time said, we need to institute that they will never go 3 days without Torah. Now, this is before Ezra's time. So how do we explain this? This sounds like already before, I'll go through all the wording now. It's because they read on Shabbat, then you have a break of Sunday, then you read on Monday already. Then you have a break on Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you read on Thursday. And in this way, you ensure that there's never 3 days that go without learning Torah. So how do we explain this takanot of Ezra? Me'ikara tiknu chad gavra tlate psuke, inami tlata gavra tlata psuke. So we say the original takana was either one person read 3 psukim, or 3 people each read a pasuk. Okay, and then you basically had only 3 psukim being read, either by 3 people. Why the number 3 so important? Keneged kohanim leviim Yisraelim. It's a representative of all the Jewish people. We have kohanim, leviim Yisraelim. So it was either one person 3 psukim, or 3 people each a pasuk. Ezra came atahu takin tlata gavrev asara psuke keneged asara batlanim. He said we're going to have 3 men, 10 psukim, and that's because of the asara batlanim, like in relation to the asara batlanim. What are asara batlanim? Batlanim sounds like they don't do anything. But usually batlanim is understood as the 10 people who keep the shul going. There's 10 people, and they even say there's like jobs for these people. You take 3 judges, and then, right, for every town needs kind of public figures. So 3 judges, shaliach of the court. Then you need the chazan in the shul. You need, and there's basically different roles, the tzedakah collectors, 2 tzedakah collectors, one who gives out the tzedakah. Okay, then you get to 10 of people in the city that are important and needed in every city. And they're the ones who are supposed to make sure the minyan happens. And so they basically say that Ezra instituted 10 psukim be recited, and not just 3 by 3 people. And the 3 people keneged kohanim leviim Yisraelim, and the 10 psukim keneged these asara batlanim. Okay, next, danin b'sheni, then it's already a less earth-shattering, takana, because it was already, there was this concept, he just expanded on. Danim b'sheni v'chamishi. Why did they institute courts on Mondays and Thursdays? And this, by the way, if you remember, we saw this from Ketubot, right? Why do you get married on a certain day? Because then you can go to court the next day and all that. If there's some issue with the betulim, that's how we started the Masechet. Dishliche. Why they do it on Mondays and Thursdays? Because that's when people are there. Because people are there already to mikveh b'sifra, because they're already going to read from the Torah. Okay. It was also the days of the shuk. So it's interesting they don't make any mention of that. It seems like on account of the fact they instituted it on Mondays and Thursdays, they also instituted. By the way, we also saw this on the Megillah, because that's when they would read, right? They would sometimes make Megillah reading depending on where you were from, right? In the bigger cities on the days of the shuk. The people would come from the smaller cities anyway into the bigger cities, and they would read on different days. Why would they do laundry on Thursday? Mishum kvod Shabbat, in order to make Shabbat nicer. Okay, what does this mean? So some people think this means specifically before Friday. Don't do laundry on Friday. Okay, all those mothers or fathers of soldiers who help their kids do laundry, not so easy, right? There are kids from the army who come home, or kids from wherever they are and come home for Shabbat, and all that they want to do is, do the laundry, or, for those who do it for themselves also. It's a problem, according to this, to do laundry on Friday. Okay, obviously, nowadays it's quite different. So let's just talk about the possible reasons why. Number one, we don't want you doing it on Friday because you have lots of other things to do on Friday. Now imagine you have to go out to the river, you have to collect water, you have to wash the clothes, bring them out, hang them to dry. That's a lot of work. Nowadays, it's not as much work to throw it in the wash, throw it in the dryer, or hang it out to dry. So maybe not as relevant. Although we all know we're busy anyway on Fridays, and maybe it is a good day not to push off your laundry to Friday when you have other things to be doing. Number two, it could be it's that we want to make sure you have clean, dry clothes for Shabbos. And in those days, if you're going to hang it out to dry, it will not be clean and dry. If you have a dryer, then of course this all becomes irrelevant because you can throw it in the dryer, it'll be ready for Shabbat. So different possibilities about, right? For the most part, this doesn't seem so relevant. Does it mean specifically on Thursday so that your clothes are bright and clean and ready for Shabbat? Or does it mean just don't do it on Friday and really you could do it any other day? But, it's kind of easier when you make a takanot, let's everybody do laundry on Thursday. And then, kind of everyone remembers we're not supposed to do it on Friday. So the question is, again, is it directly related because then you'll have clean clothes on Shabbat? Or is it just to prevent you from not doing other things you meant to do on Friday because you're busy doing laundry? Shiur ochalim shum be'erev Shabbat. You should eat garlic on erev Shabbat. Why? Mishum ona. Well, because of the mitzvah of ona, and that's periodically supposed to at least at certain intervals have relations. A man is supposed to have relations with his wife. Dichtiv asher piryo yitem beito. Says the piryo is your seed you should give in its time. Basically, meaning there's a time factor here. What is that? Right? Usually it's when the woman goes to the mikveh, but also Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Tamer Rab Nachman, Tamer Rab Kana, Tamer Rabbi Yochanan. One of these four people said the statement, Zeh mishamesh mitato me'erev Shabbat le'erev Shabbat. A man is supposed to have relations with his wife. A couple is supposed to have relations with each other on Friday nights. There's something about it. We learned about this before in Brachot. Tanu Rabbanan. So now why the garlic? Well, there's 5 things. It's 5 things they've said about garlic. Health benefits of garlic. Masbia, it's satiating. Mashchin, it warms your body. Matzil panim, it makes your face shine. Marbeh hazera, this is the important one. Okay, it increases the sperm. And horeg kinim shebnei me'ayim, it kills bugs that are in the intestines. Not sure if this is worms or something, or not exactly sure what they mean here, that are in your intestines. Yesh omrim machnis aval motzi takina. Some people say it brings about a feeling of love and basically pushes off jealousy. Okay, whether garlic does all these things or not is a good question, but there are a lot of health benefits to garlic, as they say. So that's why they would eat garlic. She has to wake up early to bake the bread. Why is that? This isn't just good advice, okay? I know sometimes I'm teaching the daf and there's women up early making challahs on Friday. So, that's like you're really fulfilling what the Gemara says as you're learning Gemara, which is great, as long as you can concentrate. And it's not just good advice, okay, get it done early. Also the dough needs to rise and all that. But also you want to make sure you have bread for poor people. So some people say, by the way, this is specifically on Friday, okay? And it's specifically related to Shabbat. Some people say this is whatever day you're going to make bread, make it early because the poor people come around in the morning. They want food and then your bread will be ready. Okay, it reminds me of all these bakeries, besides the joke about Dunkin' Donuts, but in general, right, that they're always up very early in the bakeries getting everything ready. And this, by the way, shows that they viewed the women in their private houses as being people to provide for the community. So they say this is an issue of tzniut. So either it's pants, something like knickers under her skirt, so that she's more tsanua, so that if her skirt moves, there'll be something underneath. Or some people say it's an apron because if her if her dress or whatever she's wearing underneath gets dirty, she'll pick it up to wash it, and then it will also be not sinuous. If you wear an apron on top, you won't have that problem. So as I said, Rashi says this means to comb her hair. Tosfot seems to think it means to wash your hair. So, and then, by the way, this whole custom that women take a bath or take a long shower before going to the mikveh is a later thing. The real issue of washing, according to Tosfot anyway, is the chafifa on the head. Some people claim it's the whole body, but most people think it's really the head. So like there's an issue. Let's say you don't have enough hot water to go around to prepare for the mikveh, also wash your hair and also your body. You're supposed to wash your hair first because that seems to be the more major issue here. So now, the Gemara is going to ask, what are you talking about? Just like we asked about Torah, but that was done before. Also this is actually from the Torah, D'oraita. It comes from the Torah, Tanya. says you should wash your flesh in the water. That's going to the mikveh. What this means is your basal should go in the water. That means there can't be any separation between your body and the water. So no dirt or anything else. You have to remove dirt from your body. Et bisaro, but why does it say et bisaro? It just could have said brachatz bisaro b'mayim. What is the et coming to include? We've already had this many times that et comes to include all sorts of things. Et hatafel bisaro, something that is secondary to your flesh. What would that be? Ma'ini hu se'al. From there, we learn that your hair is considered part of your body, and you can't have any sort of separation between your hair and your body. Now, hair is prone more than your body, or at least it's harder to see, to getting knots and to getting dirt stuck in it. So therefore, it seems like obvious, if we're worried about a chatzitza, obviously you have to comb your hair through or wash it out. So amrei de'oraita li'iyude. On a Torah level, you just have to look. You have to look in your hair and make sure you have no knots, no nothing. But dilma mikta, right? Maybe you'll have knots, inami maos midi, or maybe there's dirt stuck in your hair, right? How many times do someone says, oh, there's something in your hair, let me take it out, So de'oraita, you have to look. Mishum chatzitza, because the chatzitza, moving down to amubet, ataiu taking chafifa. He then instituted, though, what's better than looking? To wash, okay, or to comb it. So again, depending on which explanation you take, it's either washing or combing. We obviously do both. And that's his takanot. There's actually a relevance to this. If you go to the mikveh on Friday night, usually you're supposed to do your preparations just before you go to the mikveh, but on Friday night, it's not possible because you have to wait till it's dark to go to the mikveh, and Shabbos already came in before, and you can't do the combing or the washing right before you go to the mikveh. So you actually have a halacha, a deoraita, to look very carefully on Shabbat, because since you can't, if you're already bathing, washing, doing all that, then you should always be looking, but you can basically assume you're clean. But on Shabbat, when you can't do that right up to when you're going in, you actually have a mitzvah, and this comes from the Torah here, to look and check, make sure you don't have any chatzitza. Shiur rochlim mechazlim ba'ayarot. So now you can't stop the peddlers from going door to door to sell these perfumes. Mishum takshite nashim. This is because we want to allow women to be able to adorn themselves with perfumes. Why is this? You might not like this reason. Kadesha leis ganu abal lehet. Right, so their husbands don't get disgusted by them. Make sure they smell nice for their husband's sake. But the main thing is we wanted to allow the women to have perfume, and therefore, since they would go around from door to door, no one is allowed to stop them. Almost like also it's a bit of a free market, but that doesn't really seem to be the reason that they're giving here. But the people, the locals, again, we're talking about people who come from afar, these peddlers who go walk from town to town and go door to door selling. They can't, the peddlers who are in the shuk can't stop them from doing that. Tikain tefillah, they wanted to make it easier. I also wonder if it's because the women were often in the houses and therefore they wanted to make it easier. You remember we've talked about these rochlim. They don't exactly talk so positively about them because they would go into the women's houses and be selling perfume, and some issues sometimes would come up here with the man being alone with the woman in the house. We actually came across this not so long ago. Okay, tikain tefillah labale keri. Now we get to the question, what on earth did he do? Because what are you talking about? Of course, a Baal Keri needs a mikveh by Torah law. Again, we're going to ask the same question we asked before about the chafifa. Doraitahu. This is a Torah law. Diktiv, it says it explicitly. When a man has a seminal emission, he goes to the mikveh. So the answer, Doraitahu litruma b'kochim. What do you have to go to the mikveh for if you're impure from this shikvat zera, from the seminal emission? You have to go in order to eat truma or to eat sacrificial meat. That's what was the first Mishna in the Gemara about the kohanim. When do we say arvit? From the time the kohanim nechsim lecho b'trumatan. That would be a kohen who was Baal Keri and went to the mikveh in the morning. He would wait till sunset till the end of sunset to be able to eat, till Seder Kochavim we call it. So what on earth did Ezra do? Atahu tiken afilu ledivrei Torah. He said, this is a very interesting halacha. He said that if you're a Baal Keri, let's say you have a relationship with your wife the night before, you can't learn Torah the next day until you go to the mikveh. And some people even extended it to going to shul. You can't daven in shul. It's created a big problem. It's not so easy, right? Every time you have a relationship, you have to go to the mikveh, especially if it's freezing out or, it's not like they have heated mikvehs in those days. So this takanot eventually, first of all, it never really became widely accepted, some people think. And that's why eventually Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera talks about this in a different sugya in Brachot, and we don't do it anymore, okay? Now, why? Either he didn't think that he says you don't do this, and it could be he didn't think that Ezra actually, just like we had a debate about what Yoshua instituted, he maybe didn't think that Ezra instituted this. Some people say, no, Ezra did, but people didn't really keep it. And therefore, right, a minhag, it's always different when there's a minhag that spreads and everybody keeps it. That's one of the reasons, by the way, why kitniot is such a strong minhag, even though now there's a lot of backlash these days that people try to say, no, whatever, but there's a big fight about it. But basically, that was a minhag that actually spread to many, many communities, and it was very well accepted. That always ends up with a very different status than a minhag that doesn't. Some people say that Ezra instituted temporarily in the first place, because there's a whole thing about you can't undo a takanot of someone who is greater than you. Now, Ezra was definitely greater than Rabbanit ben Betera. So, there's a question: how did he undo what Ezra did? So some people say Ezra did it like on condition. I'm doing this, but if somebody wants to later get rid of it, they can. It's unlikely that it's a little bit weird to institute a takanot in that way. Anyway, there's a bit of a tension here about what exactly happened, and we don't keep this anymore. And some people say, again, it's either to learn. Some people even go so far as to say to daven in shul. And by the way, it also then, it didn't allow people to daven. It didn't allow people to learn. If people weren't going to the mikveh, it created this huge problem. So you could see where there was backlash, and it ended up not really sticking. Whereas, to institute laning on Monday, Thursday wasn't so complicated, and therefore that stuck. Okay, that's the 10 takanot of Ezra. Now we're moving on. There's 10 unique halachot, or actually a lot are halachot that don't apply in Jerusalem. Okay, things that are different in Jerusalem than in other places. Ein habayit chalut ba. Okay, this is a halacha that comes up at the end of Sefer Vayikra about if you live in a walled city and you sell a house, it's different than selling a house not in a walled city. Not in a walled city, you can always buy the house back, and it always goes back to you in the Jubilee year. But if it's in a walled city and you sell your house, you have 1 year option to buy it back, where they have to sell it back to you. After that, they don't have to sell it back to you, and it doesn't go back to you in the Jubilee year. But that is not true of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a walled city. Chalut comes from the lashon of muchlat, definitive. It's not a definitive sale. The laws that apply to a walled city do not apply to the walled city of Jerusalem. We'll have to see why all this is as we go on. Egla arufa. If there's a dead body outside the city and the closest city is Jerusalem, you're usually supposed to do this egla arufa ceremony. We learned all about it in Sota, but you don't do that in Jerusalem. If you have a city that the majority of the inhabitants start worshiping idols, you're supposed to destroy the entire city. And you don't do that in Jerusalem, thank God, right? We have a big problem. Assuming this would happen in Jerusalem, but if it would happen, the whole city would be destroyed. There is no bayit menuga, leprous house, which you could declare a house leprous. That doesn't happen in Jerusalem. If you have a house that has all the signs of leprosy, we don't declare it a leprous house. Okay, those are all part of one category that we'll see soon that all have to do with the fact, I'll already tell you just so you have a sense before we move on, which is Jerusalem wasn't given to any particular tribe. Okay, that's a concept we're going to talk about soon, but because it wasn't given to any particular tribe, these all have to do with the land belonging to a particular tribe. And since Jerusalem is not owned by any particular tribe, it's kind of owned by everybody equally, therefore these laws don't apply. Next, the second category has to do with impurities. Jerusalem is a city with a lot of kohanim, people who are going on aliyah regel, right? They're going to the temple to bring sacrifice. Let's say the korban pesach. If you're impure, you can't bring the sacrifice. There's sacrificial meat and other things around. So because of that, there's certain halachot. So one is you don't put out zizim u'ziztraot, things that jut out from your house that will basically cover. If let's say there's a dead body underneath, buried in the ground, that makes a tent over it. It's like an ohel. So if you have a protrusion from your house and there's tumah underneath, anyone who walks under any part of your protrusion, let's say they didn't go by the part where the dead body was, but they went on the other part of it, but it's all under the same protrusion, that will make you impure. Ein osim ba'ashpatot. You don't make big permanent garbage dumps there. Okay, we're going to see there were temporary garbage dumps, but not big permanent ones, because that will be a breeding ground for creepy crawlers that are going to die and then cause passing on impurity. And this, by the way, connects with our Mishna, because we saw about the tarnagolim, that you can't you can't raise roosters and chickens in Jerusalem because they go into the garbage, they take out the shretzim and then pass on impurity to all sorts of things. So obviously they must be talking about the temporary garbage dumps. You have to have some garbage area to put garbage, but not these big ones. You can't use furnaces, okay, for, let's say you're a smith, and you're making things in your furnace. Can't do that. We'll get to why soon. Seems a little bit weird. If you ever go to the rose garden in Jerusalem, right? So this says there were rose gardens all the way back to the time of the Nevi'im Rishonim. Those are the gardens we allow to stay, but any other gardens or orchards we can't have. You can't raise chickens. And you can't leave the dead overnight. You have to bury them immediately. You might know that this Minhag Yerushalayim is based on this. They try as much as they can to bury people on the day of, right? There's lots of times where we push off funerals in Jerusalem. They really try not to, unless there's a really important reason, like family can't get there, but they try to do them. I've been to funerals at 2 a.m. because they try to get it done that day based on this halacha. Okay, let's go through the list and see what the connection of all these things is. Okay, I lost my place for a second. Okay. In habayit chalutba, dichtiv. Bekam habayit asher ba'ir asher lo choma letzmitu lakoneu tolidorotav. So the house that is in the city. Now they assume city means a city that was inhabited by a particular tribe. This was not. So the house that's in the city, which has a wall, will stay there in the new owner for generations. That's the unique law, but it's only if it's in the city and not in a city that doesn't, right? And they hold, there's actually a debate about this, but this source, the entire source, because a lot of the halachot are based on this, holds that Jerusalem wasn't divided into tribes. Now, some people say it was divided between Judah and Benjamin. Okay, some people say, oh no, that's just the temple is divided between Judah and Benjamin, but the city itself wasn't. Some people think it wasn't divided at all. Some people think it was divided. There's a debate about this, but the Tana who said this source, basically, or whoever it was, I don't know if it's a Tana, it actually wasn't introduced with us, the Tanu Rabbanan, but whoever says the source obviously holds that Jerusalem was not divided into tribes. Ve'enanas, again, that means nobody really owned it. Why? So all these psukim we're going to basically show for these 4 things that they have to do with having someone inherit it. Right? If you find a dead body in the ground, in the land where God gave you to inherit. Well, if nobody specifically inherits Jerusalem, then it's not going to be relevant. Again, you have to hold that. Why? Again, your cities. Your cities means your cities that are yours, that you inhabited, that you inherited. Okay, it doesn't become leprous houses, do not become declared leprous houses. I will bring leprosy in the land where you have acquired it. Achuzah is to acquire. Okay, I see Ruth is telling us, if you want to look it up, that the machloket is in Yoma Daf Yud Bet Amud Aleph 12a. So if anybody wants to see the machloket about Jerusalem being split up, divided into portions, you can see it there. Okay, you don't put any. Okay, we're done with the first 4. Those all had to do with Jerusalem. Not, again, this opinion, the whole wasn't divided up into tribes. You can't put protrusions coming out, or little mirpasot, like porches. Mipnei oel atuma, because again, there'll be tuma underneath, and this will basically cause a covering, which again, if there's a kazayit of a dead body underneath that whole protrusion, anywhere you walk underneath that will make you impure. And like we said, there's a lot of kohanim, and here it says, we don't want to mess up the people going on aliyah l'regel to bring sacrifices. Garbage dumps, mishum shkatzim. Rashi changes it to shratzim, right? Because of the creepy crawlers that carry impurity, which abound in the garbage. They crawl into the garbage, then they die, and then we have a lot of them. Okay, why can't you have furnaces there? Mishum kutra, because of the smoke. Okay, what's wrong with the smoke? Well, this is going to go into another category of creating, some people say it's because we're minimizing the beauty of the city because you're going to end up with darkened walls. Some people say it's because you're going to end up with darkened walls in the temple, and we don't want the temple always to look beautiful. Some people say it's because we don't want the smoke coming up from the temple to mix with the smoke coming up from these furnaces. And I think that's because of the reach nichach. You want this beautiful smell of the sacrifices. When it mixes with this other smell already, it's not the smell of the sacrifices. This is the same idea. If we go with the first opinion, mishum sircha, because it smells awful. What smells awful? Some people say it's the fertilizer you use, and some people say it's when you weed out the stuff and then you leave the weeds on the side, they start to smell bad. This we already learned. You can't raise chickens, mishum kodashim, because they'll, again, go in the garbage dumps and then bring shretzim all over and ruin other, things that are pure, that are meant to be pure. Why do you not leave the dead body overnight? Gemara. It's a tradition. Okay, that didn't help us very much. Some people say that the reason is that, again, we don't want to increase impurity. Right? You leave dead bodies around, it causes more impurity before they're buried. Now we're back to the Mishnah, and here we go back to this line in the Mishnah, we don't breed pigs, raise pigs anywhere, not just in Israel, but anywhere. Now we're going to see a source for the story. It's a story that we already learned at the end of Masechet Sotah. It was actually on the last half of Sotah. You'll probably remember it. Tanu Rabbanit, Kishasaru Beit Cheshmonai Zeh al Zeh, when there was a case where the Hasmonean kings were fighting with each other, these two brothers, and one put a siege on the city of Jerusalem. The other was in Jerusalem, one was in, one was out, one put a siege on the city. So let's see who's who. Haya Horkanus mibifnim, Aristoblus mibachutz. Aristoblus was outside, Horkanus was inside. They were the two brothers. Every day, the people on the inside would give money to the people on the outside to get sacrifices to be able to bring to the temple. According to Josephus, the story is told in Josephus, and he basically says they were paying tons of money because they wouldn't give them animals unless they gave them a lot of money. So they would be ma'alim lahem tmidim. Okay, and they would give them the sacrifices for the korban tamid. And there was an elderly person there, an older man, I don't know, elderly, but an older man who knew chokhmah yavanit. He knew Greek wisdom. Okay, doesn't mean, it's not clear. Does this mean he knew ancient Greek? Does this mean he knew wisdom of Greek, like a secret language of how to talk? Does it mean just Greek he knew and other people didn't know Greek? It's a little weird because a lot of people did speak Greek at the time, but clearly he knew something that not everybody knew. And he secretly told, because he knew this code language, he was able to tell the people on the outside, I have the way to destroy the people. And the people didn't hear, so they had no idea what was coming. Amar lahem, as long as you do the avoda, nothing will happen. I'm sorry. As long as, I just didn't translate it, as long as they keep doing their ritual and you keep giving them sacrifices, nothing's going to happen to them. They're going to keep surviving because that's keeping them alive. But if you don't let them bring their sacrifices, their God will get angry at them, and God will get angry, and you'll be able to conquer them. So what they do, just like every other day, they gave them money to the outside people, and they gave them a pig. The pigs start climbing up the wall. It got to halfway up the wall. Now, as pigs do, right? He grabbed onto the wall to kind of not fall. And there was a huge earthquake. Okay, we're going to see from the next line that it destroyed the crops all around, and it was a huge, huge to-do. And when that terrible tragedy happened of this earthquake, it caused a response on the part of the rabbis, and they said, cursed is the person who breeds pigs, and cursed is the person who teaches his son chokhmah yavanit. So it's interesting the way they have a person who teaches their son. If you remember the whole thing with women learning Torah, one of the sources said a man shouldn't teach his daughter, right? It wasn't you can't learn on your own. It just said don't teach your son, don't teach your daughter. But which could be understood as no one can learn it, or it could be understood as specifically don't teach the next generation. But if they want to learn on their own, they can. It's a good question how to read it. We're going to get into this whole isur. Is it really forbidden to teach chokhmah yavanit? That's going to be the next question of the Gemara, which we'll deal with tomorrow. And about that, if you want like another reference to that whole story, this is when they said the following thing: in that year, they brought the korban omer. They had to go far away to bring the korban omer, and the shtei alechem. That was brought from the new crop. And usually you were supposed to bring it from as close to Jerusalem as possible. But because of the earthquake, it destroyed all the crops that were growing, and they had to go far away to bring both the korban omer, which is from the first crop of the barley, and the shtei alechem, which we bring on Shavuot, which is from the first of the wheat. Okay, with that, we finished today's daf. So we saw, again, we finished up with the takanot of Yoshua. Why did they add this other one? We explained because that was our version is Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's, and that was Rabbi Yochanan, that other one. And then we had the takanot, the 10 takanot that Ezra instituted. We talked about all of those. And then we got to the 10 dvarim ne'emru b'Yerushalayim. And then from there, we went back to this issue of the Mishna, where it said we can't raise pigs. And then it basically gave a story with the background of that. Okay, Toto raises this issue that it says in the Gemara there in Sota, it says it's from Titus, and this isn't the time of Titus. That's it, yeah. And there's a bit of an issue with the timing and how this all worked, but you can leave that aside, or you can look at Tosfot if you want. Okay, wishing everyone a good day. B'sorot tovot. Let's hope for better news. Rough day again.